Good morning, everyone. You know, speaking after Mr. Mohandas Pai is a really tough act. And I think Vinita decided to punish me because I really gave her the runaround before I confirmed for this conference. So I'm going to be really careful. When she sent in the agenda last evening, and to my horror, I saw TV Mohandas Pai, keynote speaker, and I scribbled some notes aligned to some of the conversations that we just had that he shared with us. So thank you very much for the invitation, Vinita. It's my pleasure to be here. Let me quickly begin by giving you a perspective of the Infosys actions on, in this particular space to which Mr. Pai has already alluded. And then I will share with you some aspects of actions that I think we must lead as women in India. So Infosys, as has already been said, is a signatory to the United Nations Global Compact and the Women's Empowerment Principles, which include the establishment of a high-level corporate leadership for gender equality. I'm going to come back to this point because I'm trying my best to figure out what it means. Fairness and non-discrimination at work, health and safety. Of course, we have the Anti-Sexual Harassment Initiative, which is a very powerful initiative and provides a very neutral platform to our women employees. Tons of training and development, enterprise development and sustainability, supply chain opportunities for women, advocacy and community initiatives, and of course, the measurement of progress. What you can't measure, you can't improve. In this context, I would like to quickly make a reference to about 2 or 3 initiatives that Infosys has successfully engaged in, which speaks about creating a larger social impact. You know, Mr. Pai referred to creating ecosystems. He spoke about don't insulate yourself in your corporation and imagine that the policies and programs that you create is going to really create all the change that you want. And in this context, I will share with you 3 very special initiatives in no particular order. Infosys last year, through the Infosys Foundation, invested in something called the Parishudh project. Now, Parishudh is actually, in simple words, toilet building project. Infosys went to North Karnataka and studied the need for hygiene and a specific requirement for women in society. So they went ahead and set up 10,000 toilets in North Karnataka. Now, is that all that the country needs? Of course not. What it did was it actually sparked off a revolution. And this particular revolution, it led to the creation of new entrepreneurs with various toilet technologies and improvement in women staying on in schools, girl children staying on in schools. You know, Mr. Mohan spoke about Akshay Patra, and I'll come to that in a moment. But there's a whole piece around sanitation and hygiene, which keeps girl children in schools. Interestingly, the central government had to take note of that because, you know, you can't continue to build toilets and imagine that's the only thing you have to do. But the whole idea was to create a spark, was to spark off a movement. And today you have families participating in this project and insisting on this. The social transformation it has created is that today, when looking for a girl to marry your son off to, and the girls come in, they make, their families actually insist that the families they marry into, the boys, the house must necessarily have a toilet. So it's the little things, it's the larger social transformation that has much larger impacts. You know, you spoke about the Gulabi Auto. I don't want to speak about it well in advance because I think starting March 8th and onwards, women's safety is going to become a very, very important issue for Bangalore City and I hope for the rest of the country. We've got to stand up and lead that. Another example that I must touch on is, we have right here Mr. Mohandas Pai, who started off with this germ of an idea of making sure that no child must go hungry. Do you believe it? And everyone thought, shucks, you must be mad. What are you going to do about it? Well, I'm going to feed a few of them. What does that matter? And it went back to the starfish story, you know, one starfish at a time. Today, the movement, I call it the movement, it feeds 1.2 million children. And to sustain it across a decade is no mean feat. Consistently, every day, continuing to do your little bit to keep children back in school. A third dimension is, of course, another program that he's very familiar with. It happened under his leadership. We call them the Campus Connect and the Spark programs, all about strengthening and raising the aspirations. So the Infosys belief in strengthening education systems and access to education to improve opportunities for employment. And of course, I think a lot of people, the Indian psyche suggests teach a man to fish. So education occupies a very special place in our culture too. Today, thanks to all of these initiatives, and I'm sure they will contribute more as we go along, and there will be many more such initiatives. I think today, the fact that you have 65% women at entry level did not happen by accident. Of course, they were supported by government reforms, they were supported by families and societies sending their daughters to school and then on to college. But it is industries like these that have actually created the aspiration, shown the promise for growth, for safe and secure work environments. You know, it was heartrending when speaking to parents. You know, I was addressing parents at a Campus Connect gathering in a college. And they said, you know, we want to send our daughters to Infosys. So, of course, I felt very flattered, and I said, that's quite an obvious choice, but try to keep it straight-faced. And I said, why? So they said, you know, one of the most important things, this is the first time this child is going out of the home. And I cannot tell you, ma'am, the only consideration that we have, and we are not ashamed to admit it, is safety. And today, it's corporations like Infosys that actually ensure that our girls are safe at work. It gives us the confidence to be able to even make that transition and that particular move. So, you know, this was just this piece on the larger social space, the larger ecosystem. Of course, there is tons more to do. And I also see a huge role as many of us. This is almost like preaching to the converted, you know, but women, as role models, as mothers, as wives, also have a very important role to play. Let me just move on from here. For a long time, you know, the words women's empowerment have been bothering me a fair bit, you know. And every time I think of women's empowerment, I cannot tell you how belittling the words actually mean. And they kind of, you know, I went to the Webster's dictionary, and it helpfully suggests empowerment is about equipping or supplying somebody with the ability. Would you believe it? And that didn't help either. So this is akin to something that I experienced not very long ago. I once went to the United States on a client assignment, and I was actually talking about, I'd been invited to conduct a session on cross-cultural collaboration. There was a view that we needed to have both the Americans and Indians in the room discussing difference and arriving at ways in which they could collaborate and work more effectively. So when I went there, the chief of diversity of this very reputed organization took a lot of trouble to explain to me the diversity stance of the organization. And they said, look, Ms. Newton, we have two types of people in this organization, you know. And very broadly, we can classify them into dominant and subordinate. All our diversity initiatives are aimed at enabling the dominant group work with and support the subordinate group. You know, I was almost ready to book my ticket back because I said, maybe they don't need me on this particular assignment. So I said, can you give me an example? So he says, well, you know, last summer, I went to some store that actually stocks these. I went, you know, I was looking for these little air coolers you can keep on your desk. It was a particularly hot summer. So we went to the store, and my wife and I, and when we entered, we saw the sales representative at the door speaking to another customer. And of course, because we were within earshot, we discovered that he appeared to have some difficulty communicating. However, we waited our turn, and when our turn came up, we asked this gentleman where the coolers were stocked. And then he told us it was far, you know, down the aisle on the far right. As we walked away from there, my wife said, wouldn't it have been easier for us to have just walked around and figured that out for ourselves? To which I said, no. He has a job to do, and it is my duty to enable him to do his job. Would you believe it? And every time I think of empowerment, and I think about receiving empowerment, or somebody giving you empowerment, I'm struck with this example of where it is possibly coming from. And I think that's a piece, if CARE can do something about, we should shift away from. I also found a very interesting thing that they did. You know, I went and did a little research on the women's empowerment principles and discovered that they came from something called the Calvert Women's Principles in association with the United Nations Global Compact team. Calvert is an investment firm that actually does a lot of consulting the sustainable way, whatever that means. Calvert, interestingly, had a set of principles, and one of them is the management and governance. And they have very specific references to where decisions are made in corporations. Interestingly, in the adaptation of the women's empowerment principles by the United Nations Global Compact team, that whole aspect of management and governance has got left out for whatever reason. So we have pieces around, do you have your women trained? And you know, for organizations like ours, it's so easy to say, yes, we do. And of course, there could be others that don't do it. Yeah? So what really is the benchmark? Do you have health and safety? Of course we have. Are you really crazy to insist on programs like the Anti-Sexual Harassment Initiative? Of course we are. And we jealously safeguard it. But I think the whole piece that we have missed is while having, do you have creches? You know, I'll share with you, you know, I began to look at this particular thing in other contexts. And you know, today, I looked at the transportation system. Public transportation in Bangalore city offers some fabulous parallels. Let me just share with you. You know, I did a study with the university in the United States through one of our internship programs, and we discovered that transportation systems have an inherent masculine character. You know? So the whole aspect of transportation is supposed to be an essentially masculine subject. Did you know that? Now let me tell you what that actually means. That typically transport was about convenience, predictability, and of course the economics. Without the economics, you can't run transportation systems. Today, of course, transport literature sees, you know, alien terms like flexibility, the whole experience, safety, personal and physical security. Would you believe it? There's a study which actually revealed that women, they were actually scared of standing in a bus stop than sitting in the enclosed space of a bus. Yet, most transportation safety resources are concentrated inside the bus. Women were also not comforted knowing that there was no camera, that there was a camera or a CCTV technology in the bus. To them, that was probably for after the incident. Yeah? I'm just making a reference to the disconnect between the actual need and the way we have created some of these programs. Yeah? So look at this. You know, we have a classic example of a bus that is very, very popular in Electronic City. It's called the 356 CW. It's a special service which takes you the last 10 kilometers on the famous elevated road that Mr. Pai struggled to build for us from Silk Board to Electronic City. The 10 kilometers, in addition to being a quick ride, is also provides you an aerial view of Bangalore City, whatever you can see, you know, the top of those ugly buildings, whatever, you get an aerial view of this. The beauty of that particular bus is that there is a service every 10 minutes. However, the bus is crowded, crammed to capacity with doors open and people hanging out on the elevated road, which you will observe is a very, very narrow road. If you have a bus with people hanging out, you cannot even overtake the bus. And he is driving at some crazy speeds, yeah, because it's an open road, and with people hanging out, you increase the width of your bus. And you just continue straight. No one has the guts to even overtake you. So I went back to BMTC and asked them, I said, what is the deal? He says, madam, you should be happy. You know, BMTC, you have moved them to actually pay toll. You know, BMTC will not pay toll to run a bus. We're a public organization. We don't pay toll. Today we have complied with your request to pay toll. It's a different thing that they pay $100 per day on a day pass, charge 17 rupees per ticket per person, and do multiple trips with the same bus. So it's a win-win-win-win-win for BMTC. But what is this overcrowding all about? And so we went back, we educated the drivers, we told the inspectors, we fired everybody, we got the traffic police, we charge sheeted all of them, till I finally discovered that the incentive of the driver and conductor is directly linked to the number of people in the bus. So you will get your money based on the number of people in the bus. So I told him, don't pack, yelli de jaga. So if you understand Kannada, the guy says, yelli de jaga, don't fear, don't worry, I will show you the jaga. Hogi, holage, he keeps pushing you. So you're packed like sardines, and he's still got more space. I'm making a reference once again to the systemic disconnect in the thinking, in the governance. You can have, I'm telling you, I've been in so many conferences, and one of the big things is, the analogy is so real. Every time I ask people for best practices in women's employment, the best practices are, we have a creche. And the next best practice is, we have a great celebration for women who come back after maternity leave to make them feel at home. And the best practice I love best is the management development programs we have exclusively for women. Today, of course, they're getting smarter and calling it leadership development programs. So you're all dressed up with nowhere to go. I mean, there's no leadership position that's actually waiting for you, but you're getting developed and enabled forever. Yeah? In 1913, this is the sum total of best practices. So I'm just making a reference, and I'm not belittling these efforts. Today I'm actually saying that some of these are hygiene. If you have women at the workplace, you better have a creche. If you have a person with disability, you please make sure you have access. This is hygiene. We've got to stop celebrating these as best practice. I fully appreciate there could be organizations and sectors where even the basics are not available. But we've got to raise the bar. In 1913, there was an interesting research I picked up. There's a lady called Cora Castle, and I don't know too much about Cora Castle, but the interesting tidbit. She conducted a study, a statistical study of eminent women in history. And interestingly, her study produced 868 entries of eminent women, and she ranked them in the following order. The first category is queens, the second politicians, the third mothers, the fourth mistresses, the fifth beauties, very interestingly mistresses between mothers and beauties, so there's some order in that ranking, the sixth religious women, the seven women of tragic fate. So I think our Rani of Jhansi, etc. might figure in women of tragic fate. And the eighth is women important through marriage. Essentially, what she painted was three contextual perspectives for women, the social, religious, and political. It's only today. I don't know, I was reading this research, found it fascinating. I don't know what has really changed almost a century later. Yeah? Of course, women are coming forward. You still have few, but you do have role models who have moved from history to creating what I call her story. Yeah? So here we are essentially, and the point I'm making is in a male system that is trying to get re-engineered to accommodate women. Guess why? Because women mean business. They didn't teach you correct. The way to a man's heart is through his head. Put the economics. If he listens to nothing else, he'll listen to the economics of the proposition to get them in. Yeah? So I think there is and I'm just making once again the reference to that systemic disconnect. And I'm appealing to every one of you that while you encourage best practice sharing, I think consciously every one of us must raise the bar on what really is the best practice. And I think we've got to move fast beyond some of the stuff that we do, which is passé. I had an interesting experience once again under the leadership of Mr. Pai. I was running circles around the Bangalore City Police because we had a lot of work and a lot of coordination with the police. In Electronic City, we came up some years ago with this unique problem of mugging. And I'm sure the newspapers carry tons of reports. So I became a citizen reporter on CNN, IBN, and I came out and I said, there's the mugging incidents and we've got to do something. Of course, we organized teams of police together with the Electronic City staff. We managed to make several arrests. There was a situation where there was a particular set of incidents where we could not get these guys. And, this happened on the Sarjapur area stretch, which was also fast developing. So at that time, I created another version of nuisance to the police. First I used to go and keep policing them in their policeman duties, until they were actually up to their necks here. I used to go up there and I used to say, traffic is stopped, where's the policeman? And of course, there's no policeman. If there's a policeman, also traffic is stopped because there's more chaos. So we did a lot of work with them and trained them. So at that time, we were just unable to catch this gang that was operating in the Sarjapur stretch. I'm talking many years ago. So I began something called the midnight patrols with the traffic police and the Electronic City security. And the police were very worried. They said, you have become a liability to us. Aren't you afraid of these midnight patrols? I said, I'm not afraid. I'm being protected by the Bangalore City Police. So they looked at each other in disbelief and they said, madam, if any incident occurs, we will lose our job. I said, you will not lose your job. I'm giving you the confidence. We couldn't catch the culprits. I said, I will become a decoy. All I have to do is drive with your glasses up, darkened windows, down a lonely stretch. I know I'm covered by you guys. There was deathly silence. Then they got their legal counsel to inform them that it's a bigger risk than somebody getting mugged. Yeah? The name of the police force itself will be tarnished. So the point that I'm trying to make is, I think we've got to go beyond some of the stereotypes that we've actually set for ourselves. And therefore, I'm actually so looking forward to, when I met this morning, when I met Mr. Bai, I was so looking forward to this whole initiative of creating a safer city. I think more than creating a safer city, I think we are demonstrating a more equal platform. We are demonstrating a concern for a platform that will be fairer and more equitable. If you're going to constantly be worried of your own shadow, you're not going to be able to do too much productive work. And that's the point I'm making. Sometimes you have to go back and work with the basics. So very quickly, the research, another important tidbit, research into gender differences in leadership styles has been going around in circles for years, and you must think about this. Traditionally, women in our societies have been socialized to become nurturing, likable, affectionate, soft-spoken, warm, yielding, selfless, gentle, compassionate, and I know everyone's saying, yeah, that's me, okay, dependent rather than independent, dominant, aggressive, self-reliant, strong, and individualistic. According to gender stereotype, the attributes and behaviors typically attributed to women, they're opposite of what is expected of a leader. You will have tons of people coming to programs and telling you, you know why we need women? They bring the softer aspect into teams. You know why we need women? Because they're motherly and they nurture everybody. Yeah? I think that stereotype is just kind of worn to bits. And it goes on. So after a while, you better be womanly, motherly, soft and caring, and provide the softer issues, because the guy on the other side doesn't know any of this. Poor thing, there's a gap in his education. He's never even understood all of this. Some of the most soft, compassionate people I know are men. So let's not forget that. It's like that stereotype around cooking. Yeah, woman's place in the kitchen. Some of the best cooks in the world are men. Yeah, so I think over a period of time, we've got locked into our own stereotype. Yeah, so these commonly tied stereotypes imply that women who want to be successful must adopt man-like qualities. And then the further studies confirmed that women adopting a leadership style that is incongruent with the gender stereotype, they are regarded or evaluated as leaders who have a very strong style that is unwomanlike, which is not necessarily appreciated. So clearly, there's a huge conflict. So we're facing a much larger social promise. So on the other hand, I'd just like to end with saying there is a lot to change out there. There's tons to change out there. And I think the biggest way to improve our own circle of influence is to change the way we think. You know, the change that is happening here that Mr. Pai alluded to, happening right here. So I have 5 ideas that I've been using for a long time now that I thought I'd share with you. The first is find the source of your main energy. You know, get in touch with something that actually drives you, that gives you the strength to go on. Come back and connect with it as many times as possible. Don't underestimate that strength. Many times it's easy to just lose sight of it. Forget it in the rough and tumble of everyday life. The second, understand your stereotype. It's easy to say, I'm not that stereotypical person. But remember, every one of us has a stereotype of our own. It's just that we've not acknowledged it. So start looking at how people experience you, as opposed to looking at who you are and what you actually do. The third, you know, when you work with issues, get your hands around the social and the political context in which you lead. You know, don't go off into the research of this particular subject, but it's important to understand the social, the political, the cultural nuances of the leadership context in which you want to take a stance. And that's so critical to looking at what you want to succeed in and what that definition of success is. I'm a great fan of Otto Schama. If you haven't read him, you must. And he offers a fabulous word. It's called presencing. And presencing there's tons of literature around this whole aspect of presencing, which is about connecting with the inner self to give you energy from within to achieve something that's beyond just that inner self. Yeah? And of course, I think all of us, research after research says, whatever you do with women, you have them at 65% at entry level, between 6 to 8 years, you start losing them, and one of the big reasons are personal, and guess what? You can connect it to marriage and having children. It's almost as if there is no woman who's worked more than 8 years in her life, because they all exit in a body. Yeah? So I think it's important for us to continuously look at this, and what is heartening, with more numbers at the entry level, we will have more numbers. Earlier we had, Mr. Pai referred to where are the women? We'd love to hire them, where are they? I'm hoping in the next few years, the conversation will change to we have all the women, yeah? But we don't have any more space. We don't have the capacity to actually hire. And I think we're moving towards that, which is very, very positive. Yeah? So some thoughts, while it is easy to want to succeed in your career and be professional about it, all very important things, and you must go out there and do your bit, etc. One of the things that have always grounded me is something I read in the Rig Veda that I also practice. It says, the home has verily its foundation in the wife and the mother. For a long time when I read it, I didn't fully appreciate it. I said, oh my God, here are these old scriptures. See, once again, that stereotype which says I have to be in the kitchen. If there's one thing I dread, it's being in the kitchen. So I went back and I looked at this piece, and it actually brought home the aspect of the much larger influence and role that you have to play. Larry Bossidy, a leader at Allied Signals, when he was retiring, he said, when you retire, what is the true mark of a leader? You will not be remembered for Q3's profits in 2004. You might even be forgiven for the mess you made in 2006 results. Yeah? But what will stay on after you is the number of leaders you have created. Remember, he said that is the true testimony to leadership. And so what I thought was, leaders and ladies, when you're done and you look back, when you look back on your life and the contribution to not just the leaders that you have created in the organizations that you have led, but the leaders that you have enabled in society through your children, through people who've been influenced by who you are. Everyone who says, look at that guy, MCP, boorish fellow. Remember, there's a woman behind it, the mother. Every one of us has a role to play in the stereotypes, in the behaviors, in the cultural contexts that we create for society. And it's happening all around us. It's just that we don't recognize it. Yeah? You know, Betty Grable beautifully said, she said, the whole practice of putting women on pedestals stopped when they realized women could give their orders better from up there. Yeah, so, well, so I just said, you have a much larger role to play. And you know, when the Hindu scriptures speak about women power, they speak about Kali, Durga, Shakti, Lakshmi, Saraswati, every aspect and nuance. And I think some of that truth and some of that connection goes back and lies with our scriptures. The goddess of knowledge, the goddess of wealth and money, not just because it makes economic sense, but you know, to have more women in the workplace. But every aspect. And I think it's important for us to reflect a bit on the role that we play, not just in corporations, but in the larger corporation of the world. That is the society. That's the society that we create for tomorrow. So I'm really pleased and proud to know that people like Mrs. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw and others, Revati Ashok, are playing such an active role in building a leadership for the future that I hope will be better informed and definitely a lot more empowered. Thank you very much. Mohan, I had to change a lot on the fly because you had already told them all about the Infosys practices and policies.
Thank you, Aruna. That was wonderful. I think a few people have been complaining that it's getting a little cold in the room. So we're going to try and turn down the AC and also give you a 10